In 1974, Mel Brooks introduced audiences to Blazing Saddles. This film was written entirely by Mel Brooks, and it starred Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder in the starring roles. The supporting cast included Slim Pickens, Alex Karras, David Huddleston, as well as some Brooks regulars like Dom DeLuise, Madeline Kahn, and Harvey Korman. The original working title of the movie was called Tex X, and that eventually was rejected to avoid it being mistaken for an X-rated film. Mel Brooks came up with the idea for the film one morning while he was taking a shower. Casting of the movie became a problem initially. Originally in the title role, Mel Brooks wanted Richard Pryor to play Sheriff Bart, but the studio wasn't having any of that. The studio claimed that his history of drug arrest made him uninsurable, and they refused to approve financing with Richard Pryor as the star. This led them to cast Cleavon Little in the starring role. Now, Mel Brooks tricked Frankie Lane, who did the theme song for Blazing Saddles, and what he did was make him think that it was for a dramatic western. He never told him that it was for a comedy. Mel Brooks was really worried that Lane wouldn't sing it with conviction if he knew the truth about the film. When the film was first screened for Warner Brothers executives, none of them laughed at all. The movie looked like it was going to be a disaster, and that the studio just wouldn't release it at all. However, Mel Brooks had a trick up his sleeve. He quickly set up a screening for studio employees, and when these regular folks laughed uncontrollably throughout the movie, Warner Brothers finally agreed to take a chance on releasing it. One of the funniest scenes in the movie is when Cleavon Little aims the gun at his own head to save himself from the angry townspeople. And this actually came about from an incident from Mel Brooks' childhood. He said that once, to his disbelief, he stole some gum and a water pistol from a drugstore in the town he lived at. When a store worker tried to stop him, Brooks held the worker at bay with the very water pistol that he had taken from the store. See, Mel Brooks was a character even in his younger years. After promising the executives at Warner Brothers that he would edit out several offensive scenes, Mel Brooks never cut a single scene except one. The rest of the scenes he just left in the movie, and it's probably a good thing he did, because that's what made this movie so unique. It pushed the boundaries of what you could do and say on the big screen. Now, Gene Wilder was not the first choice for Mel Brooks to play the Waco Kid. Initially, he looked at people like Johnny Carson and multiple other actors before he decided to hire veteran screen actor Gig Young for the role. At first, Young seemed just perfect for this boozy character, until it became painfully clear that the actor really struggled with alcohol in real life. During the first day of shooting, the actor, who was reportedly going through alcohol withdrawals at the time, became violently ill, and they had to rush him to a nearby hospital. They were trying to shoot this initial scene, and Brooks thought, man, this guy is giving me some awesome stuff to work with. He's actually shaking, and I mean, it looks real. Then he realized that he never was stopping shaking, and that green stuff was coming out of his mouth and nose. He learned from that experience, if you want an alcoholic in the movie, don't cast an alcoholic to play that person. Poor Gig Young attempted to do his first shot on Friday, but by 9 a.m. in the morning, an ambulance was there picking him up and taking him away, and they had no movie. Fortunately for Brooks, Gene Wilder knew most of the kid's lines and was able to take over the part immediately. At the end of the movie, when the whole group is running out of the Warner Brothers studio front gates, there is a man in a sweater standing on the sidewalk watching the action. Mel Brooks states that that man was not part of the movie. He just simply wandered into the scene. They shoot him away and then went back to film the scene. The guy came back into the shot and is seen standing next to a light pole as the characters stream past him down the street. Brooks had asked him personally to move and explained to him that they were getting ready to shoot a scene, and the man just didn't understand that. He ignored their request and kept standing there. So Brooks ended up sending out a waiver for him to sign, and they just left him in the movie. I guess that's the way you get yourself to be a forced extra in a Mel Brooks movie. The hulking henchman Mongo was portrayed by a former NFL player that many of us remember. Alex Karras was a defensive tackle for the Detroit Lions who began appearing in films during the early 1960s. The scene where he has Mongo punch the horse was inspired by Brooks's former boss, comedian Sid Caesar, who supposedly knocked one unconscious in real life. I find that kind of hard to believe, but it's a good story. Karras would later begin acting on the small screen and is perhaps best known for playing George in the 1980 sitcom Webster. Slim Pickens, everybody loves Slim Pickens. He's such a character in almost any Western that he's in, but he really stands out in this film. In order to get into the mind of Taggart, the character that he played, he chose to spend most nights sleeping outdoors with the rifle in his hand. One of the best scenes is when Taggart gets binged in the noggin with the business end of a shovel and then wears a bandage on his head the rest of the movie. Madeline Kahn earned an Oscar nomination for her portrayal of saloon singer Lily Von Stroop. She's just excellent in this show. After being fired from the cast of Mame in 1974, Madeline Kahn took the part of the saloon singer in Blazing Saddles, and this led her to get a Best Supporting Actress nomination for the role. This was the first of several collaborations that she had with Brooks, and she went on to star in Young Frankenstein just a short time later. And speaking of Young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder is the one that pitched the idea of Young Frankenstein to Mel Brooks on the set one day. His idea was very simple. He said, what if the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein wanted nothing to do with the family whatsoever, that he was ashamed of those wackos? Mel Brooks thought the idea was just hilarious, and so he ran with it. Young Frankenstein was released in December of 1974, less than a year after Blazing Saddles arrived in theaters. When auditioning for the role of Lily, Madeline Kahn was asked by Mel Brooks to pull up her skirt so he could see her legs. And she was quite hesitant to do this, being unclear of what Brooks's intentions were. Brooks actually just wanted to see if she had legs that were good enough to approximate Marlene Dietrich's famous legs. So she eventually lifted her skirt, but when she did, she said no touching. The character of Lily Von Stroop was a parody on Marlene Dietrich. The character of Gabby Johnson is an absolute tribute to George Gabby Hayes, who some film historians have dubbed the ultimate sidekick. Hayes appeared in almost 200 films, nearly all of them westerns, including many early John Wayne films, and he also played a sidekick to such Western stars as Roy Rogers and Gene Autry. One day, while eating lunch in the Warner Brothers commissary, Mel Brooks saw John Wayne sitting at the table next to him. John Wayne yelled over to him, "Hey, I hear you're shooting a Western, where you're really pushing the limits on things that can be said in a movie." Mel Brooks gave him a copy of the script and invited him to be in the movie. He really wanted him to. He felt like he would be a great part of the film. But after reading it, John Wayne told him that he just thought it was way too dirty for his style. And he said he just couldn't do it because he felt like it might blemish his character. But he did assure Brooks that he would be the very first one in line to see it. Mel Brooks describes the writing process for the movie as being chaotic. He describes it as really creative screenwriting. He recalls that the movie was more or less written in the middle of a drunken fistfight. He states that there were 5 of us all yelling loudly the ideas that they came up with to put into the movie. Not only was Mel Brooks probably the loudest, but he was also the lucky one since he was the director that could decide what was in or out of the script. In 2006, Blazing Saddles was deemed culturally and historically significant by the Library of Congress and was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. Now, this is a great movie. If you haven't seen it in a while, go back and watch it. You'll laugh your head off. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.